Ambassador Jae-sung Kim stepped off the transport ship and looked around the massive Nexus station. The station floated in space between 7 different star systems. Each system belonged to one of the great galactic kingdoms. Kim was the first human ambassador to work here. The station was huge. Different sections were built for different alien species. The Vorthak Empire section had cold metal walls and blue lights. They were a species that loved logic and facts. The Zelani clan area had red banners and weapons on the walls. They cared about honor and fighting skills. The Rillan Syndicate Zone was full of shops and markets. They were traders who loved making money. Kim walked through the main hall. Aliens of all kinds moved around him. Some had 4 arms. Others had blue skin or scales. A few floated in the air using special suits. They all stared at him. Humans had only been in space for 50 years. To these ancient species, humans were very new and not very important. A tall alien with purple skin approached Kim. This was Zix Thara, a healer from the Teth Assembly. The Teth were known as great scholars and doctors. They could live for hundreds of years and had vast libraries of knowledge. "Welcome, human ambassador," Zix Thara said in careful English. "I am curious about your people. You are so young in the galaxy." Kim smiled. "We may be young, but we are eager to learn and help where we can." Zix Thara's large eyes blinked slowly. "Help? Most new species come here to gain power or trade agreements. What kind of help do you offer?" Zix Thara's large eyes blinked to gain power. "Imantepsing Tapke." Before Kim could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Emergency lights flashed red. A voice spoke in multiple alien languages over the speakers. Kim couldn't understand most of it, but he heard one word repeated: plague. Zix Thara's face turned pale. "My people, my homeworld, there is sickness spreading across our farming planets. Millions will die if we cannot stop it." Representatives from the other kingdoms gathered in the main hall. Each group stayed separate from the others. The Vorthok delegation pulled out data tablets and began calculating. Their leader, a tall being with silver skin, spoke in a flat voice. "The Vorthak Empire can provide medical data and analysis. Our price is access to 3 Teth research stations for 5 years." The Krex Dominion representative, a large warrior with thick armor, crossed his arms. "The Krex do not deal in sickness. We are warriors, not healers. This is not our concern." The Rillan Syndicate leader, a small being with golden fur, rubbed his hands together. "We have medical supplies in our warehouses. The cost will be 2 million credits, plus exclusive trading rights to 4 star systems." One by one, each kingdom offered help. But every offer came with a high price or limited assistance. They saw the plague as a business opportunity or a chance to gain political power. Kim listened to all of this and felt sick to his stomach. These were people who were dying. Families losing their children and parents. How could anyone put a price on saving lives? "What does Earth offer?" asked the Zelani representative, a proud warrior with red markings on her face. Kim took a deep breath. "We offer everything we have. Our best doctors, our medical supplies, our research data. We ask for nothing in return except the chance to save lives." The hall went silent. Every alien stared at Kim. Some looked confused. Others seemed suspicious. "Nothing?" asked the Vorthak leader. "This makes no logical sense. What do humans gain from this transaction?" "We gain friends," Kim said simply. "We gain the knowledge that we helped when people needed it most." The Rillan trader laughed. "Friends, do not pay for trade routes or military protection. You humans are foolish." Kim turned to Zix Thara. "How quickly can we get our medical team to your worlds?" Zix Thara's eyes filled with tears. In her long life, she had never met a species that offered help without asking for something back. 3 days, if we use fast ships. Then we leave in 2 hours, Kim said. I'll contact Dr. Sarah Chen on Earth. She's our best disease specialist. She'll want to work directly with your healers. 2 hours later, Dr. Chen arrived on Nexus Station with a team of 20 human doctors and nurses. She was a small woman, with kind eyes and steady hands. She had spent her life fighting diseases on Earth and other human colonies. Zixthara met them at the docking bay. Dr. Chen, I must warn you. This plague affects the nervous system. Even our healers are getting sick. You could die helping us. Dr. Chen picked up her medical bag. That's why we're here. Someone has to help, and we can't do that from a safe distance. The trip to the Teth homeworld took 3 days. During the journey, Dr. Chen and Zixthara worked together constantly. They shared medical knowledge and learned each other's techniques. Dr. Chen showed Zixthara human surgical methods. Zixthara taught Dr. Chen about Teth biohealing, a process that used the body's own energy to fight disease. When they arrived at the Teth homeworld, the situation was worse than anyone had expected. Entire cities were empty. Hospitals overflowed with sick people. The Teth healers were exhausted, and many were sick themselves. Dr. Chen and her team worked for weeks without rest. They didn't just treat patients. They worked side by side with Teth healers, learning their methods and teaching their own. Dr. Chen became the first human to master biohealing techniques. Zixthara learned human surgical precision that saved lives when biohealing wasn't enough. Slowly, the plague began to retreat. The combination of human medical technology and Teth biohealing proved more effective than either method alone. More importantly, humans and Teth began to truly understand each other. Other species watched this partnership with interest. The Vorthak studied the medical data and found the cooperation illogical but effective. The Kreks admired the courage shown by both species. Even the Rillan traders noticed that the humans had gained something valuable: the complete trust and friendship of an entire kingdom. When the plague was finally defeated, Zixthara stood with Dr. Chen at a ceremony honoring all who had helped. "You saved my people," she said. "How can we ever repay you? We iv, we iv." Dr. Chen smiled. "You already have. You taught us biohealing. You shared your knowledge freely. You became our friends." Zixthara realized something important that day. Humans didn't just form alliances or trade agreements. They formed real friendships. They cared about individuals, not just governments or species. This was something new in the galaxy. News of the human response to the Teth plague spread to all 7 kingdoms. For the first time, other species began to wonder if there was something different about these young humans. Something that might change how the galaxy worked. Kim returned to Nexus Station with Dr. Chen and her team. The other ambassadors treated him differently now. They had seen what humans were willing to do for others. Some were suspicious. Others were curious. But all of them were paying attention. The real change had only just begun. 6 months after the Teth plague ended, trouble came to the Kreks' dominion. The Kreks were proud warriors who valued strength and honor above all else. They had ruled their space for thousands of years through military might and strict codes of combat. War Chief Gorthak had been planning his rebellion for years. He believed the current Kreks leadership had grown weak. They traded with other species instead of conquering them. They talked about peace when they should be preparing for war. Gorthak gathered followers who shared his beliefs. They called themselves the Pure Kreks. The rebellion began on a cold morning when Gorthak's forces attacked the capital world. They struck government buildings and military bases. The legitimate government, led by High Commander Vrexatal, was caught off guard. Within hours, the planet was split between 2 armies. News of the civil war reached Nexus Station quickly. Ambassador Kim called an emergency meeting with representatives from all 7 kingdoms. The conference room was tense, as each delegate considered their options. The Vorthak Empire representative spoke first. Her silver skin reflected the room's lights as she consulted her datapad. The Vorthak can provide strategic analysis of both military forces. We calculate Gorthak has a 63% chance of victory. Our consulting fee is 5 million credits. The Rillan syndicate leader leaned forward eagerly. This war will disrupt trade routes. We can provide alternate shipping paths for double the normal rates. Both sides will need weapons and supplies. We offer competitive prices to all customers. The Etherian collective mystic closed her many eyes in concentration. We foresee much death and suffering. The cosmic balance will be disturbed. We can provide spiritual guidance to restore harmony. The cost is access to 3 sacred sites for meditation purposes. Each kingdom offered help, but only if they gained something valuable in return. They saw the Civil War as another business opportunity or chance to expand their influence. Commander Vrextal's message was desperate when it came through the communication system. Our people are caught in the middle. Gorthak attacks civilian areas. Families are trapped in war zones. We need help evacuating non-combatants. Kim stood up before anyone else could speak. Earth will send military advisors and evacuation specialists. We don't want payment. We want to help innocent people escape this war. The Zelani representative, warrior Captain Thelnara, looked confused. Military advisors? Will humans fight alongside the legitimate government? No, Kim said. We'll help organize evacuations and protect civilians. Our people won't choose sides in your civil war. But we won't let families suffer if we can prevent it. This answer puzzled everyone in the room. Military aid usually meant picking a side and fighting. Humans offered something different. Help without taking sides in the conflict. Captain Elena Rodriguez arrived at Krex Space 3 days later with a small team of specialists. She was a career military officer who had spent years developing civilian evacuation procedures. Her team included medical personnel, logistics experts, and communications specialists. Rodriguez met with both Vrextal and representatives from civilian populations. She ignored Gorthak's forces completely. We're not here to fight your war, she told everyone. We're here to help non-combatants reach safety. The Krex found this approach strange. In their culture, you either fought with someone or against them. The idea of helping without choosing sides made no sense to most warriors. Young Krex warrior Thaxmol was assigned to escort the human team. He had expected to meet fierce warriors who would prove themselves in combat. Instead, he found people who spent their time talking to frightened civilians and organizing supply convoys. Why do you not fight? Thaxmol asked Rodriguez as they watched human medics treat wounded civilians. You are military. Fighting is what military does. Rodriguez knelt beside a Krex child who had been separated from her parents. She spoke gently as she cleaned a cut on the child's arm. Fighting is only one part of what military can do. Sometimes protecting people means getting them away from the fighting. Thaxmol watched Rodriguez work with the civilians. She taught them basic tactical thinking. How to move safely through dangerous areas. How to recognize safe zones. How to organize themselves into groups that could help each other. She turned frightened victims into people who could participate in their own rescue. The most important moment came 3 weeks into the evacuation operations. Gorthak's forces attacked a refugee camp where thousands of civilians had gathered. The camp was supposed to be neutral territory, but Gorthak saw the refugees as supporters of his enemies. Rodriguez's team was outnumbered 10-1. Traditional military thinking said they should retreat and save themselves. Instead, Rodriguez did something that shocked every Krex who witnessed it. She organized the refugees themselves into a defense network. She gave weapons to those who could fight and taught others how to help with logistics and medical care. When Gorthak's forces attacked, they found not helpless civilians, but an organized community that fought back together. Thaxmol found himself fighting alongside human soldiers and Krex refugees. He watched Rodriguez risk her own life repeatedly to save others. She didn't fight for glory or honor. She fought because she refused to abandon the people who depended on her. During the battle, Rodriguez was badly wounded while shielding a group of Krex children from an explosion. As Thaxmol carried her to safety, she kept giving orders to help organize the refugee evacuation. "Why?" Thaxmol asked her. "Why do you care so much about our people? What do humans gain from this?" Rodriguez smiled weakly. "We gain the knowledge that we helped. That's enough." Quote, "After the battle, Gorthak's rebellion began to fall apart. Too many Krex had seen how the humans helped civilians without asking for anything back. They compared this to Gorthak's willingness to attack refugee camps. Many of Gorthak's own followers began to question their leader. The civil war ended when Gorthak was captured by his own forces and turned over to the legitimate government. Vrextal offered to give humans military bases and trade agreements as payment for their help. Kim refused these offers. "We didn't help you to gain military advantage. We helped because it was the right thing to do." This response amazed the Krex. In their experience, military aid always came with strings attached. The humans had helped save thousands of lives and wanted nothing in return except friendship. Thaxmol made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. He requested permission to study at the Human Military Academy. Not to learn how to fight better, but to understand how humans thought about leadership and protecting people. "I want to learn your way of thinking," he told Rodriguez before she left Krex space. "You showed me that real strength comes from protecting others, not from winning battles." Rodriguez's evacuation techniques became standard procedure throughout Krex space. But more importantly, thousands of Krex civilians remembered how humans had helped them when their own government couldn't. They remembered that humans risked their lives for people they didn't even know. Word of the human response to the Krex Civil War spread throughout the galaxy. Other species began to notice a pattern. Wherever humans went, they seemed to leave behind not just political alliances, but genuine friendships and transformed communities. The Vorthak Empire began studying human behavior as a logical puzzle. How could a species be so successful at building relationships? The Rillan Syndicate wondered if there might be profit in the human approach to business. Even the isolated Novan Reich began to pay attention to these strange newcomers. On Nexus Station, Ambassador Kim received reports from human teams working throughout the galaxy. Each report told similar stories. Humans weren't just making treaties with alien governments. They were making friends with individuals from every species they met. Kim realized that humanity was changing the galaxy without even trying. They weren't seeking to conquer or control anyone. They were simply being themselves, people who cared about others and were willing to help when help was needed. But Kim also knew that this approach would eventually be tested in ways they couldn't imagine. Not every challenge could be solved with friendship and good intentions. The galaxy was a dangerous place, and humanity's greatest test was still coming. 2 years had passed since the Krex Civil War ended. Humanity's influence had spread across the galaxy through countless small connections. Each human who worked with alien species left behind friendships and changed perspectives. These relationships were creating something new in galactic politics. Dr. Sarah Chen's research partnership with Zix Thara had revolutionized medicine in 3-star systems. Their combined techniques of human surgery and Teth biohealing had saved millions of lives. But more importantly, their friendship had inspired other scientists to work together across species lines. Captain Elena Rodriguez's evacuation methods were now taught at military academies throughout Krex space. But the real change was in how the Krex thought about strength. Young warriors like Thaxmol were learning that protecting others was more important than winning battles. The most unexpected changes were happening in places where humans had made personal connections. Rillan merchant, Kiexara, had initially viewed humans as just another trading partner. That changed when she met human economist David Park at a trade conference on Nexus Station. Park had been hired to help negotiate a complex trade agreement between the Rillan Syndicate and the Teth Assembly. Most economists focused only on profits and trade routes. Park was different. He spent time learning about the cultures and families involved in the trading networks. Kixara had brought her daughter Mintel to the station during the negotiations. The young Rillan was struggling with mathematics, which was essential for success in their trading culture. Park noticed Mintel's frustration and offered to help. Numbers are just another language, Park told Mintel as they worked together in the station's library. Once you understand what they're trying to tell you, they become your friends instead of your enemies. Park used human teaching methods that made mathematics fun instead of frightening. He showed Mintel how numbers connected to real things like planning trade routes and calculating supply needs. Within weeks, Mintel went from failing her studies to excelling in them. Kixara was amazed by Park's kindness to her daughter. In Rillan culture, business competitors didn't usually help each other's families. But Park spent hours each day teaching Mintel, asking for nothing in return. "Why do you help my daughter?" Kixara asked him one evening. "She is not your responsibility. You gain no profit from teaching her." Park smiled as he watched Mintel solve a complex equation. "I gain the happiness of seeing a bright young person succeed. That's worth more than any profit." This conversation changed how Kixara thought about business and relationships. She began to see trading not just as a way to make money, but as a way to build connections between different worlds and cultures. The relationship between Park and Kixara's family became crucial when a trade war erupted between the Rillan Syndicate and the Novan Reich. The Novan Reich was an isolationist kingdom that rarely interacted with other species. They had decided that too much alien influence was corrupting their pure culture. The trade war hurt many Rillan families, including Kixara's. Their trading company faced bankruptcy when the Novan Reich blocked access to 3 major shipping routes. Traditional Rillan response would be to find new trade partners and cut losses. Instead, Park did something that shocked the entire Rillan Syndicate. He organized a support network of human and alien businesses to help affected Rillan families. Companies from across the galaxy offered temporary work, shared shipping routes, and provided emergency funding. "This makes no business sense," other Rillan traders told Kixara. "Humans are creating a system that reduces their own profits to help competitors." But Kixara understood what Park had taught her. The humans weren't just building business relationships. They were building a community where everyone helped each other succeed. Similar changes were happening throughout the galaxy. On the Vorthok homeworld, scientist Zephyra had been working with human researcher Dr. Yuki Tanaka on quantum physics problems. The Vorthok were known for pure logical thinking. But Tanaka showed Zephyra that emotion and intuition could enhance scientific discovery. "Logic tells us what is possible," Tanaka explained during one of their late-night research sessions. "But emotion tells us what is important. The combination helps us choose which possibilities to explore." Tanaka. 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 This idea was revolutionary to Zephyra. Her people had always believed that emotion clouded logical thinking. Working with Tanaka showed her that feelings could actually guide logic toward more meaningful discoveries. In Etherian space, Mystic Velthar was learning that human meditation techniques could enhance psychic abilities. The Etherian collective had always used complex rituals and expensive equipment for their mental training. Human methods were simple and accessible to anyone. "Your minds work differently than ours," Velthar told human psychologist Dr. James Wright. "But your techniques help us reach deeper levels of consciousness than we thought possible." Even the isolationist Novan Reich was being affected by human influence. When their colony ship, Fortress of Purity, suffered catastrophic engine failure, human engineer Maria Santos was the only person close enough to help. Santos worked for 16 hours straight to prevent the ship from exploding, saving 12,000 Novan lives. The Novan captain was confused by Santos's dedication. "Why do you risk your life for people who have rejected contact with your species?" Santos wiped sweat from her face as she finished repairing the engine. Because you're people. And people help each other when someone needs it. Each of these individual relationships created ripple effects throughout the galaxy. The people touched by humanity became advocates for change within their own societies. Cheeks-Ara started teaching other Rillan traders about cooperative business practices. Zephyra encouraged other Vorthak scientists to include intuition in their research methods. Velthar shared human meditation techniques with fellow mystics. What started as personal friendships began reshaping entire kingdoms. The changes were subtle at first, but they were spreading. Young people, in particular, were attracted to the human way of thinking about relationships and cooperation. On Nexus Station, Ambassador Kim watched these developments with amazement and some concern. Humanity was influencing galactic civilization in ways he had never expected. But he also knew that change often created resistance from those who preferred the old ways. Kim received a private message from an unknown source. The message was simple but troubling. The young species thinks they can change the galaxy. They will learn that some things cannot be changed. Some things must be stopped. Kim showed the message to his security chief, but they couldn't trace its origin. It could have come from any of the 7 kingdoms, or from somewhere else entirely. What worried Kim most was the timing. The message had arrived just as human influence was reaching a critical point in galactic politics. At the same time, long-range sensors were detecting strange signals from the edge of known space. The signals were artificial, but didn't match any known technology. Whatever was sending them was big, and it was moving toward inhabited star systems. Dr. Chen returned to Nexus Station from a medical conference on the Teth homeworld. She brought disturbing news from the outer colonies. People are reporting dreams, she told Kim. The same dream, spreading from planet to planet. They dream of darkness that consumes everything. Metal beings that turn living worlds into empty space. Kim felt a chill run down his spine. Ancient legends from all 7 kingdoms mentioned the Devourers, a machine intelligence that had destroyed countless civilizations millions of years ago. Most people thought the stories were myths. But the dreams suggested something different. If the Devourers were real, and if they were returning, then the galaxy faced a threat that none of the kingdoms could handle alone. Traditional rivalries and competition would have to be set aside. The question was whether the relationships humans had built throughout the galaxy would be strong enough to hold civilization together when everything else fell apart. Kim looked out at the stars and wondered if humanity's greatest test was about to begin. They had changed the galaxy through friendship and cooperation. Soon, they would discover if those changes were deep enough to save everyone from an ancient evil that had returned to finish what it started long ago. The ancient enemy emerged from the dark space between galaxies like a nightmare made real. The Devourers had been sleeping for millions of years, waiting for organic civilizations to develop enough technology to be worth consuming. Now, they had awakened to find 7 kingdoms ripe for harvest. The first attack came without warning. The Devourer fleet appeared at the edge of Vorthok space and destroyed 3 colonies in minutes. Their ships were massive geometric shapes that absorbed energy instead of reflecting it. They looked like holes cut out of space itself. Ambassador Kim watched the emergency session at Nexus Station with growing horror. Representatives from all 7 kingdoms were present, but they were responding to the crisis exactly as their cultures dictated. Each kingdom's reaction was predictable, and each reaction was failing. The Vorthak Empire had retreated into pure calculation mode. Their silver-skinned representative spoke in a flat, emotionless voice. Analysis of enemy technology indicates survival probability for individual kingdoms ranges from 0 to 12%. Logical response is immediate evacuation to distant star systems. War Chief Krextal of the Krex Dominion pounded his fist on the conference table. The Krex do not retreat. We will face these machines in honorable combat. Our warriors will die with glory if necessary. The preliminary battle reports were devastating. Krex battle fleets had charged directly at Devourer ships, following their traditional tactics of frontal assault. The ancient machines had simply absorbed the energy from Krek's weapons and converted it into power for their own systems. Entire fleets had been destroyed without damaging a single Devourer ship. Rillan Syndicate leader, Kik Snoll, was frantically trying to establish communication with the invaders. Every intelligence seeks something of value. We must discover what these Devourers want and negotiate a trade agreement. But the Devourers had no interest in negotiation. They saw organic life as a resource to be harvested, nothing more. Their response to Rillan communication attempts was to strip mine two heavily populated trading worlds, consuming every living thing and leaving behind empty rock. The Etherian collective mystic Veldana sat in deep meditation, trying to make psychic contact with the machine intelligence. When she opened her many eyes, they were filled with terror. "There is nothing there," she whispered. "No consciousness, as we understand it. Only endless hunger and the drive to consume." Each kingdom was fighting the Devourers according to their own nature and traditions. The Teth Assembly was frantically trying to develop biological weapons that might affect mechanical beings. The Zelani clans were organizing defensive positions based on ancient honor codes. The Novan Reich had sealed their borders completely and were pretending the threat didn't exist. Every traditional response was failing catastrophically. Kim stood up slowly. Every alien eye in the room focused on him. "We need to do something different," he said quietly. "All of our separate approaches are failing. We need to work together." The Vorthak representative's silver face showed confusion. "Illogical. Human military capacity is minimal compared to established kingdoms. Your species offers no significant advantage in this conflict." "You're right," Kim admitted. "Humanity can't defeat the Devourers through military force, but we can offer something else. We can activate the network." Kim pressed a button on his communication device. Within seconds, responses began flowing in from humans stationed throughout the galaxy. Dr. Chen, from Teth Space. Captain Rodriguez from a Krex military academy. David Park from Rillan trading routes. Maria Santos from a Novan repair facility. Dozens of other humans who had spent years building relationships across species lines. The message Kim sent was simple. Emergency Protocol 7. Contact your networks. Stand together or fall alone. What happened next had never occurred in galactic history. Instead of kingdoms responding as unified political entities, individuals from all 7 species began coordinating directly with each other across traditional boundaries. Dr. Chen contacted her Teth research partner Zixthara. Together, they reached out to Vorthak scientist Zephyra, who had learned to combine logic with intuition. The 3 of them began working on biomechanical hybrid technology that might confuse Devourer sensors. Captain Rodriguez activated the network of Krex warriors she had trained. But instead of organizing them for traditional combat, she implemented civilian evacuation protocols on a massive scale. Krex strength was redirected toward protecting refugees rather than seeking glorious battles. David Park contacted Cheeks-Ara and her network of Rillan traders. Instead of trying to negotiate with the Devourers, they began organizing supply lines to support evacuation efforts and refugee camps. Rillan shipping networks became lifelines for displaced populations. The transformation was remarkable. Species that had maintained formal distance for thousands of years were suddenly working together as individuals who trusted each other. Personal relationships became more important than political boundaries. The turning point came when the Devourers targeted Nexus Station itself. The station was a symbol of galactic cooperation and contained representatives from all 7 kingdoms. Destroying it would eliminate unified resistance and force each kingdom to fight alone. Traditional evacuation protocols called for each kingdom's representatives to retreat to their home territories. This would have scattered the leadership and ended any hope of coordinated resistance. The plan was logical, but it guaranteed defeat. Thaxmol, the young Krex warrior trained by Captain Rodriguez, took charge of the evacuation instead. He ignored traditional military hierarchy and species boundaries. "We evacuate together, or we die separately," he announced. "No one gets left behind." No. What followed was unprecedented in galactic history. A Krex warrior giving orders to Vorthak scientists, Teth healers working alongside Rillan merchants, Etherian mystics coordinating with Novan engineers. 7 different species functioning as a single organism. Chixara's daughter, Mintel, now a grown mathematician trained in human methods, calculated optimal evacuation routes that used ships from all 7 kingdoms. Her equations treated every person equally, regardless of species or political status. Dr. Chen and Zix Thara established emergency medical stations that treated injuries using combined human-Teth techniques. They saved lives that would have been lost under traditional medical protocols. The station's defense wasn't won through superior firepower. The Devourers were too powerful for any military solution. Instead, the defense succeeded because 7 different species worked together so seamlessly that the ancient machines couldn't predict their actions. Devourer technology was designed to counter the predictable responses of individual species. Vorthak logic, Krex aggression, Rillan greed. Each reaction could be calculated and countered. But the combination of all 7 species working as one created patterns that the machines couldn't understand. When Krex warriors followed Teth healing protocols instead of combat doctrine, the Devourers were confused. When Vorthak scientists factored Etherian intuition into their calculations, the machines couldn't predict the results. When Rillan traders prioritized evacuation over profit, their behavior became incomprehensible to mechanical intelligence. The evacuation of Nexus Station took 18 hours. By traditional standards, it should have been impossible. 12 different species, hundreds of thousands of people, and massive amounts of equipment were moved to safety while under attack by technologically superior enemies. But it worked because the people involved weren't thinking like representatives of their kingdoms. They were thinking like friends who refused to abandon each other. As the last transport ship left Nexus Station, the Devourers finally overwhelmed the station's defenses. The ancient structure exploded in a burst of light, visible across 3 star systems. But everyone had escaped. Every single person had been saved. In the aftermath, as refugee ships regrouped in deep space, something remarkable was happening. The evacuation had proven that cooperation between species wasn't just possible. It was more effective than any traditional approach. Representatives from all 7 kingdoms looked around and realized that the old ways of doing things were gone forever. The crisis had forced them to work together as individuals, rather than as political entities. And that cooperation had saved them all. But the war was far from over. The Devourers were still out there, consuming worlds and growing stronger. The successful evacuation had only bought time. Now they had to figure out how to turn their newfound cooperation into a weapon that could defeat an ancient enemy that had destroyed countless civilizations. The real test of human influence on galactic civilization was just beginning. 10 years had passed since the Devourer War ended. The galaxy that emerged from that conflict was completely different from the one that had existed before. The old kingdom structure, 7 separate civilizations interacting only through formal treaties, had evolved into something unprecedented in galactic history. The formal name was the Galactic Cooperative, but most people simply called it the human way. This wasn't because humans ruled the galaxy. They remained a minority species with average technology and modest military power. But their approach to relationships had become the foundation upon which galactic civilization now operated. Ambassador Jae-Sung Kim, now much older and grayer, stood in the memorial garden on New Nexus Station. The original station had been destroyed during the war, but this replacement was built as a joint project by all species working together. The garden was at its heart, a living monument to those who had chosen to stand together when everything else fell apart. Today marked the 10th anniversary of the war's end. Representatives from across the galaxy had gathered not in government buildings or military facilities, but here, among the growing plants and flowing water. This was how the new galaxy worked. Important decisions were made in places that celebrated life and growth rather than power and control. Kim watched children of 7 different species playing together in the garden paths. Krek's youngsters carefully adjusted their strength so they could wrestle with smaller human children. Teth kids taught Rillan friends how to sense the emotions of plants. Vorthak children used logic puzzles to help Etherian mystics focus their meditation. These children didn't see themselves as belonging to separate kingdoms. They were simply friends who happened to have different skin colors and body shapes. They spoke multiple languages fluently and moved between different cultural traditions as easily as changing clothes. Dr. Sarah Chen approached Kim slowly, using a walking stick to support her aging frame. Her hair was white now, but her eyes still sparkled with the curiosity that had driven her to master Teth biohealing decades ago. "Hard to believe how much has changed," she said, settling onto a bench beside him. Kim nodded toward a group of young adults working together on some kind of technical project. "Look at that team. 2 humans, a Krex engineer, a Vorthok mathematician, and a Teth biospecialist. They're building something that none of their species could create alone." The project the young people were working on was typical of the new galaxy. It combined Krex materials science with Vorthak computational power, human intuition, and Teth bioengineering. The result would be a new type of medical equipment that could adapt to the biology of any species. This kind of cooperation had become normal throughout the galaxy. Research stations, manufacturing facilities, and even military units were integrated communities where species worked together based on individual skills rather than political boundaries. Chixara approached them, now an elderly Rillan with golden fur turned silver with age. Her daughter Mintel walked beside her, carrying a small, Teth human child, who called both of them grandmother. Interspecies families had become common as the galaxy learned to see individuals rather than representatives of kingdoms. "The ceremony is beginning," Chixara informed them. "They want you to speak first, Ambassador Kim." Kim stood slowly and walked toward the central platform, where thousands of beings from across the galaxy waited to hear him. As he looked out at the crowd, he saw the faces of the future. Young people who had grown up in the integrated galaxy. Scientists who shared knowledge freely across species lines. Soldiers who protected everyone equally. Traders who built communities instead of just accumulating wealth. 10 years ago, Kim began, his voice carrying clearly through the garden's sound system. Our galaxy faced destruction. An ancient enemy returned to finish what they had started millions of years ago. By all logical calculation, we should have been consumed just like countless civilizations before us. The crowd was silent, remembering the terror of those dark days when devourer fleets had swept through star system after star system. We survived because we learned to do something that had never been done before. We stopped thinking of ourselves as separate species competing for resources and started thinking of ourselves as individuals choosing to help each other. Kim paused, looking at the memorial walls that surrounded the garden. Each wall was covered with names, but not just the names of those who had died in the war. These walls listed everyone who had chosen to stand together across species lines. Dr. Chen's name was there, along with Zix Thara and Zephra. Captain Rodriguez was listed alongside Taxmol and the thousands of Krex civilians they had trained and protected. The Devourers were destroyed not by superior weapons or brilliant tactics, but by something they couldn't understand or counter. They were machines built to fight predictable enemies. They could defeat any single species using traditional approaches. But they had no programming to handle 7 species working as one mind with many bodies. The victory had been costly. Entire star systems had been consumed before the cooperative learned to fight effectively. Billions had died in the early stages of the war. But those who survived did so because they refused to abandon each other, when abandonment would have been logical. We learned that our greatest strength wasn't military might or technological advancement. Our strength was our willingness to see each other as individuals worth protecting rather than strangers to be used or feared. General Thaxmol stepped forward to present the annual awards honoring those who best embodied the principles of standing together. The Krex warrior had changed dramatically since his youth. His armor now carried symbols from all 7 species, representing his role as a protector of galactic civilization, rather than just Krex interests. The first award went to a Vorthak scientist who had learned to include emotional considerations in her logical calculations. Her research on trauma recovery had helped millions of war survivors heal from psychological wounds. The second award honored a Rillan merchant who had spent her fortune building schools on refugee worlds, teaching children of all species together. But the most meaningful moment came when Thaxmol called forward an Etherian mystic who had developed new meditation techniques for integrated communities. Veltanu has shown us that spiritual growth comes not from isolation, but from connection across all forms of consciousness. Veltanu accepted the award with the graceful movements typical of her species. I learned from human teachers that the mind grows strongest when it opens to other perspectives rather than closing itself off for protection. As the ceremony continued, Kim found himself thinking about the memorial's true purpose. Each name carved into the garden walls represented not just individuals who had made sacrifices, but relationships that had transformed the galaxy. The memorial didn't celebrate heroes who had won victories through superior strength. It honored ordinary people who had chosen to care about others different from themselves. The final speaker was Zix Thara, now ancient even by Teth standards but still sharp and vital. Her biohealing techniques had saved countless lives during the war, but her real contribution was the example she had set for cooperation between species. The humans taught us something that changed everything, she said, her voice carrying the wisdom of centuries. They showed us that the choice to stand together creates bonds stronger than any weapon and more lasting than any kingdom. As the sun set over New Nexus Station, people began to disperse back to their homes and work across the galaxy. But the garden remained full of children playing together, their laughter echoing off the memorial walls. Kim watched them and smiled. These children would grow up in a galaxy where cooperation across species lines was normal. They would face new challenges that required new solutions. But they would face those challenges together, as friends rather than strangers. The kingdoms still existed as cultural centers and administrative regions. The Krex still valued strength and honor. The Teth still pursued knowledge and healing. The Vorthok still used logic to solve problems. But these cultural differences had become sources of strength rather than barriers to cooperation. Mintel's daughter ran up to Kim and hugged his leg. She was part Rillan, part Teth, and part human, a living symbol of the integrated galaxy. She said in the mix of languages that children now used naturally, "Will you tell us the story about the plague again?" Kim picked up the child and carried her toward the group of youngsters gathering around the memorial walls. The story of Dr. Chen and Zix Thara's first collaboration had become a favorite tale among the young ones. As Kim began the familiar story, he realized that this was how the galaxy's transformation would be preserved. Not through laws or treaties, but through stories passed down from one generation to the next. Stories about people who chose to help each other when help was needed most. The galaxy had learned that to stand with humans, or with anyone different from yourself, was not just to be remembered, but to be celebrated beyond all kingdoms and borders. That lesson would live on as long as there were people willing to choose connection over isolation, cooperation over competition, and friendship over fear. In the end, that choice had saved them all.